Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and knock out at least part of the central nervous system, or part of the nervous system. There's actually two parts. I'm not sure if we're going to get through all of it. We might, but again, I'm going to try and keep this somewhat short. So, but we just got done talking about neurons and neurotransmitters, and it's sort of the beginning of the whole process of what happens when we start doing things either automatically or not automatically. Um, so we are going to continue that with the nervous system. There's two different nervous systems that we're going to talk about. Oh, and this is self-timed for some reason. Um, there are two nervous systems. The first one that we're going to talk about is the central nervous system, or the CNS, and this basically deals with the brain and the spinal column. And then you have what's called the peripheral nervous system, and that is all the other nerves that sort of come out from the spinal column. Okay, so those are the two we're going to talk about, maybe today, maybe in the next couple of shorter videos. But all right, again, the nervous system has two parts. The CNS, and you'll see this generally on tests and even in the AP exam, you'll see the central nervous system usually written as CNS and the peripheral nervous system as PNS. So just make sure you know these shortened versions of the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. I did mention in one of my videos enteric nervous system, but that doesn't matter apparently in AP Psych, so we're not going to worry about those. We did talk a little bit about interneurons. In the central nervous system, these neurons will communicate and intervene between the sensory and the motor neurons. Remember, we talked about sensory sends messages up to the brain, and the motor sends messages down to the other parts of the body. Well, there are some neurons that will sort of go in between the two, and those are interneurons. So again, we've already talked about motor efferent and afferent, or motor and sensory neurons, so I'm not going to go over that again. We may go over it some in class to make sure you know this. But it should make sense if you think about, stepping on a nail or touching something hot. The sensory neurons is what senses that, and your motor neurons is what tells your hand to let go. All right. We said earlier the central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. They are so important. This is something to make sure that, I guess this is kind of anecdotal, but they are so important in the body that they are encased in bone for protection. You've got the brain, which is in the skull, and the spinal cord, which is surrounded by the spinal column. Okay, so but it's very they're very important for your bodies. And then you've got the peripheral nervous system. These are all the nerves which feed into it. So all your, you've heard maybe people talk about how they have a pinched sciatic nerve. That's just a specific nerve. I've got some nerve damage in my elbow. So, there are times when my elbow will swell and my fingers will sort of get tingly. Just old injuries. But that's part of those issues are part of the peripheral nervous system. And here is actually an example of both. You have your brain up here, of course, your spinal column. This is, of course, missing all the bones. And these are the nerves sort of stretched out. So obviously you've got your arms here, your legs that come down here. I believe this is these are the really long cells in your legs. But this is this is your nervous structure. Central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. I remember, and it should be easy to remember because anything that's on the periphery or on the outside, out here, and then central, things that are central or on the inside, are right here. So it's kind of a creepy picture to look at, especially when you got somebody's eyes right here. But this is your nervous system as a whole. Within the peripheral nervous system, there are two main types of functions. All right, and I talked about this a little bit today while watching one of the videos, and that is the somatic and the autonomic systems. And we're going to talk about those for a minute. The somatic system is a part of the peripheral system that controls the body's skeletal muscles or voluntary movements. All right, so this is me. This is when you walk. This is when you talk. This is when you move your hands. So that's the somatic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is part of the peripheral nervous system that controls glands, muscles, and internal organs like the heart. So again, these things are not voluntary. And then a part of that not voluntary stuff, you've got the sympathetic. That arouses the body, mobilizes its energy, and is in stressful situations. So if you see a deer or something out in front of you when you're hunting, and your heart rate goes up, you get buck fever or something like that. That's your sympathetic nervous system. That gets you pumped up. On the flip side of that, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which will actually calm you down. All right, so sympathetic gets you going, parasympathetic gets you calmed down. All right, and both of these are a part of the autonomic nervous system. We don't consciously think about these things; it just happens based on your whatever's going on. And then in your central nervous system, there are other parasympathetic things that's going on as well. You've got your pupils that will expand and contract that you don't think about, your salivary glands when you're hungry, your breathing, your heartbeat, your stomach acid, the secretions from your gallbladder. All these things are parasympathetic in the central nervous system. Now, the things I talked about earlier was from the peripheral. This is from the central. And then, when you got to go to the potty, when you got to go to the bathroom, your bladder contractions, and then things that go on within the sex organs as well. These are all part of the central nervous system, and we don't think about them. They're parasympathetic. Again, here's some other things in the sympathetic. So these are when you get excited. Your pupils dilate. So this is when you're calming down. I'm sorry, I should have made that clear. This is when it's calming down, and this is when this is when you're getting hyped up. So this is when you see that deer, or this is when you see that person on your doorstep that you don't have a clue who it is, and it's 11 o'clock at midnight, and everything starts raising. Okay. Autonomic nervous system is also part of the, you've heard fight or flight. You see a large grizzly bear come running at you in the woods. All right, your heart beats fast. Your lungs get bigger so that you can get more oxygen into your bloodstream, so that you can actually get fuel to your muscles, so you can fight or flight. Your pupils dilate so you can get more light in, so you can make sure so that you know what's going on. So that, again, that's the sympathetic system. It's automatic, fight or flight. All right, and then on the flip side of that, again, the parasympathetic, rest and digest. Pupils will constrict, heart rate slows, lungs gets a little smaller, and the stomach gets smaller. Remember, sympathetic, speed things up. Parasympathetic, you're pumping the brake. Take a look at these. I'll pause it for a minute, and I want you to just kind of look and decide whether they're somatic or autonomic. Is this things that we think about or things that happen automatically? So pause this, look through each one of these, and decide which one it is. I'm not going to pause it because you can. There is a thing called reflexes, and this is deals with a pathway. A simple spinal reflex pathway is composed of a single sensory neuron and a single motor neuron connected through the spine with an interneuron. All right, and this type of response does not involve the brain, and this is why we feel our body move before we feel the stimuli. A warm, headless body, think about this, could demonstrate a reflex like that produced when hitting the patella tendon with a hammer. Because, if say you pop my head off, of course I'm going to fall down because I don't have the skeletal muscular messages tell me to stand up. However, if you stimulate one of my reflex pathways, like in your knee, you've seen the doctors hit your knee and have your foot jump. All right, that will still work because that is all still alive and it doesn't involve the brain. So if you cut my head off or anybody's head off and you were able to get them sort of the body to sit up straight and take that hammer and hit that patella tendon, it'll still jump. And it'll keep doing that until those cells eventually die through lack of oxygen. And that's one of the reasons why chickens can survive, in a matter of speaking, when you remove their heads. A spinal reflex is an automatic response to a stimuli. This is a single neuron, single sensory neuron, single motor neuron, and an interneuron. Again, brain's not involved. And here's a look of how that occurs. Notice this does not go. Here's the interneuron right here. It's within the spinal column. It's still within the central nervous system, but it is not dealing with the brain. You step on a tack, you're going to jump a lot of times before you feel it. Or the thing that gets me a lot of times is something hot. You touch something hot and move your hand moves before it even registers that it's hot in your brain. Well, that is the autonomic nervous system. It is protecting that, protecting the skin on your hand. So, and this is how the divisions of this is a tree, sort of the division tree of the nervous system. So again, you've got your two. You got the CNS and the PNS, and you can kind of see how this is broken up. I think I have a better one than this somewhere in my notes. I may have to find. This is kind of very basic because it only really gives you much on the peripheral when there's still plenty to do in the central nervous system. But those are the two, the big things, again, to remember, to take from this is that there are two types of nervous system: the central, the brain in the spinal column, and peripheral, which is all the other nerves. The peripheral is divided into the somatic, which is things we know we do, and the autonomic, which is things that are automatic. And then part of the autonomic is the things that rev us up, fight or flight, which is the sympathetic, or the parasympathetic, which is where you calm down, you conserve energy. So anyways, hope you all have a good weekend. And this is probably one of the shortest videos we'll make. And keep doing your flashcards, and we'll see you all on Monday.